Welcome to Master of Science with host Professor James McCanney. The good professor's career spans 50 years as a university teacher, scientist, and engineer. Each week, he will explore the rapidly changing world of science as many long-held theories are crumbling under the weight of new data. He will cover the fields of geology, archaeology, meteorology, oceanography, space science, astronomy, cosmology, biological evolution, virology, energy, mathematics, and more. So please welcome the host of Master of Science, James McCanney.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome again. Tonight, I was supposed to talk about the Betz limit, a rather esoteric topic dealing with wind energy. The question being, how much energy can you can you extract from the wind? And there's a theoretical estimate. It's called the Betz, B-E-T-Z limit, originated by European, I think it was the German or Austrian physicists around the turn of the prior century. And it's a calculation based on kinetic energy transfer and using a non-compressible fluid such as water. So at any rate, this is a complicated topic, and I'm going to spend an entire show on this, and I was going to do it this week, but there's so much to talk about because of the inauguration of Trump yesterday dealing with science. And so these are issues that are whether you like or dislike or whatever, is irrelevant when it comes to science, because these are issues that are going to impact your life on a daily basis starting literally yesterday. So it's important to discuss these, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever, and see where all of this shakes out. Because science and engineering and just societal development has followed this path where we are literally dependent on oil. And I'll start out by, first of all, talking about there's a show, and I have never seen this show completely myself. There's a main character, his name is Tommy, and I think he's played by, slips my mind right now, but then he's about a 50-year-old hardened, hardcore guy that works out in the oil fields of Texas and Oklahoma. And of course, he's dealing with the cartels, which are there, and all of the other issues, and then all of the issues with getting oil out. And along with him, his partner there turns out to be this young Gen Z, liberal, woke attorney who is from the big city, drives a Mercedes-Benz. And so anyway, they have these conversations, and it's very interesting. For example, we are not going to have a lot of development in wind energy, and that was the design all along. General Electric and Siemens, the biggest companies pushing wind energy with three-blade wind turbines, all pushed out products that simply didn't work. They were never meant to work. By design, they were meant to never work. And anyway, that's another story. I'll talk about that a little bit later in this show about the myth of alternative energy. But anyway, some of these conversations are rather interesting, where they're driving out in a pickup truck out to one of the remote oil sites where they have what they call the one-armed bandits, the oil pumps, the oil derricks that are out in the country that run off electricity and pump oil from all over the countryside in Texas. And anyway, they're in Texas. And so the young Gen Z attorney woman goes, "Oh, you're using green energy to assist pumping oil." And she makes kind of a snide remark about it. He goes, "It's not green energy, it's alternative energy," clarifying. And he says, "There's nothing green about it." And they're standing there next to a great big 3-blade wind turbine that's out there and providing electricity for these off-grid oil pumps that are out in the middle of nowhere. There's no electric lines out there. And he goes, there's nothing green about any of this. Do you know how much coal it takes to melt the steel to make that pillar there? There's half an acre of concrete, 12 feet deep with all the rebar. Then they got to bring out a 450-foot crane to put all this stuff, and this thing will never pay back the environmental cost of building it, so that there's no break even here. And so anyway, the whole point is that 3-blade wind turbines don't work. And that's the whole point. And then he makes the comment that the society we have built, whether you like it or not, is based on the use of oil. And if it stopped flowing one day, the U.S. uses 350 million gallons of gasoline per day, about 160 million gallons of diesel fuel per day. The infrastructure to keep that flowing to the pump and into the gas tanks and into the diesel trucks that move product across this country, if that stopped, you'd all be dead. And then there's another kind of rather cute scene. She goes, the Gen Z lawyer, dressed up in her, pantsuit from the city, driving her Mercedes-Benz. She was rather indignant about talking about fracking, and they have to frack some of the oils to get them to produce more. And so she goes, well, I'm opposed to that. And he says, okay, well, go sell your Mercedes-Benz, start riding a bicycle, hunting for your food, and live in a tent out here, and you'll be the only one doing it. Nobody will notice, and it won't have any effect at all. Then he goes through the routine again. Until somebody comes along with a better plan to provide energy, this oil has to keep flowing. And of course, that's what makes gasoline. About a 55-gallon drum of oil, that's the unit that oil is measured in, is in drums. A 55-gallon drum of oil produces about 30 gallons of gasoline at the refinery. So you got to pump a lot of oil and move a lot of oil to get that 350 million gallons of gasoline per day and the 160 million gallons of diesel per day. And so I'll talk a little bit about that as the country could transition to hydrogen, but it would be a long, very slow, very brutal process. And the reverting back to building gasoline-powered automobiles and stopping the rather absurd mandate that the government should be mandating what kind of cars should be built based on philosophical conclusions. It has nothing to do with reality or any sane engineering practices. And just to put it into perspective, with the Green New Deal, they wanted to spend $1 trillion to put in solar and 3-blade wind turbines to augment our their so-called green sources of energy, when in fact the reality is that it takes more energy to produce those products than they will give back. And they only have, this is the clincher right here, boys and girls, grandmas and grandpas, moms and dads, everybody. The clincher on alternative energy, the way it is presented today, the 3-blade wind turbines and solar panels, is that they have about a 10-year lifetime, if that. Then they have to be replaced. So you're going to spend $1 trillion on stuff that's going to last 10 years and all go bad and has to be replaced. And then what are you going to do? Spend another $1 trillion every 10 years? It ain't going to happen. Boys and girls, grandmas and grandpas, moms and dads, you can feel green all you want, and that pride of seeing a 3-blade wind turbine spinning. I've got a story to tell you, and the 3-blade wind turbines require energy to get them moving. There's a motor in them. And so when you see them spinning, if you go through this field, I drove through a field of them, there must have been probably 500 of them. This is south of Illinois. And coming up through, I think it's probably in Indiana, actually, south of Chicago, on a trip one time. There were hundreds and hundreds of these big things out there, and there was a strong wind. I mean, we're talking probably 30, 35 mile an hour wind, and they were just barely turning. Oh no. These things simply don't work. They never were meant to work. Okay, so reality has to come into play here. You know, the idea that you can mandate a green, efficient system, it simply doesn't work. And the bottom line is, if these things worked, economics would dictate they would be out there making money, and the people selling them would not sell them. They would install them and generate electricity and sell the electricity forever, making much more money than the units are worth selling them as individual technological units. Do you understand this? I'm going to repeat it slowly so that you will understand. If you were a company like General Electric or Siemens or Vestas or one of the other companies, and you're making these monstrosity, huge three-blade wind turbines, which don't work, the wind just blows right through them. If they worked, if they actually produced electricity economically and not with the need of a government subsidy, tax write-off, that's Warren Buffett, who is one of the biggest investors in three-blade wind turbines, laughs. He says, we don't invest to produce energy. We invest for the tax credit. He's made billions of dollars off of tax credits. And then they sell them off the next year because they're not producing any electricity. It's a joke. But if the company producing the product, if that product produced electricity at a profit, you put it in, you put so much money invested into this unit, they would not sell them to some third party to make electricity. They wouldn't sell them because they would install them themselves and become the energy company. Do you understand this? And why don't they do that? Because the stuff they sell doesn't work. Very simple. Very, very simple. So all you green tree huggers out there, that you get a rush when you see a three-blade wind turbine spinning, just understand, it doesn't work. $1 trillion with the Green New Deal was meant to pour money into the pockets of people and businesses, and in the back door of those legislations are many, many things that have nothing to do with green energy or anything else. And so, you know, you really have to understand this. And it's fortunate that somebody like Trump has come in and been voted in. But the interesting thing is, the vast majority of people understand this. So why is energy the key to all of this? Why is energy the most important topic? Because most of the international wars are being fought because of energy and location. The war in Ukraine partly has to do with that, the positioning of being in that area because there's a lot of natural resources there. And part of the reason that Israel is dealing with the Gaza issue is because there's vast amounts of natural resources, primarily oil there. If the United States produces oil on the world market and exports it, it's going to drop the price of oil, and a lot of those things will naturally go away. And so this is coupled to the military-industrial complex that keeps oil prices high artificially, because that incites wars around the world, and wars are good for business. Guess what? Real good business. Biggest business in the world, next to child trafficking and human trafficking, and next to the pharmaceutical industries. Those rank up there, and I don't know which one is first this year. But arms trade is an enormous business, and so keeping those wars going is very important. So anybody who thinks that Trump is an insider and maybe a Manchurian candidate or whatever, no, it's not that way at all. And the American people realize that. 2 days ago, it would have been politically incorrect to say anything like that, but the reality is, if you look at the voting in the last election, where and go down to the county level, you can see these maps. They're on the internet. They're available. You can go look at them. Go into the states, go down to the county level, and look at the red. And one of the most interesting sets of maps is or map in this set of maps of the 2024 election is the direction. There are these little red arrows and little blue arrows. And the red arrow indicates, and then the length of the arrow indicates the diversion from the last election. In other words, the deviation in the voting populace. And the entire country was deviating in the red to a long, by a great deal. And so the end result, whether you like it or not, is that the country has made certain mandates. And so that's what's going on. And at the heart of this is energy, because energy is a big cost of everything. You buy a hot dog at the ball game, you know, $5 hot dog, there's about 10 cents worth of product in there. The farmer, the energy that the farmer uses, the transportation of the meat to harvest or to processing, and then refrigerating, then shipping, and then trucking again to the food store, and then being sold on the market, and then the production of the bread and the baking of the bread. Everything has an energy cost. And if you cut that energy cost in half, then all of a sudden the cost of that product literally is going to go in half. And that's what was driving inflation through the roof. That's why you can't afford, you know, when you go out to supper, you're looking at your credit card and you're deciding, am I going to take the family out to a restaurant or even to McDonald's, where it's supposedly less than a restaurant? Or are you going to maybe fix the car? Those are your choices today. I don't care if you're a doctor, attorney. I don't care if you're a nurse. I don't care if you're what you do for a living. You wash dishes in a restaurant as a second job. Your choices are, am I going to do something for me with my money, or am I going to do some necessity? And so the economy has had just the entire bottom of it drop out. Part of that is the immigration issue, where people are coming into the country working for cash, and there's a myth that this money somehow stays in the country. Every illegal alien in the country every week takes the money they earn, buys their necessity, lives as cheaply as they can, and they go to Western Union or one of the many flourishing money transfer businesses and transfer the money out of the country. So it's this giant sucking noise where money is being transferred out of the United States in huge amounts every week. And so there are people who say, oh, well, all of the money that the illegals make goes back into the economy. No, it doesn't. Most of it, probably 90% of it, goes directly out of the country to other countries. Mexico's largest income, it's not tourism in Cancun and the Mayan Riviera. It is Mexican citizens and illegals in the United States, yeah, all of them, whether they're legal, illegal, or whatever, sending money back to Mexico. That's the biggest income that Mexico has in its GDP. And so the amount of money that goes out of the United States is astronomical. And the other part of that is that with the illegals working for cash, those are the jobs that people used to have a lot of times as a second job, working in a hotel, making beds, or working in a restaurant, or working in the washing dishes in a restaurant, or whatever. And so the extra money that a lot of people in that lower income bracket used to make isn't there anymore. So what happened is the entire bottom of the U.S. economy fell out during the last 4 years. That's another cause of inflation, is that the money is simply leaving. There's a couple different causes of inflation. If you take money and cause the basic goods and services to go up, including the base product, which is energy, that's one source of inflation. If you take money out of the economy and ship it out of the country, that is another source of inflation. And when you have 10 or 15 million people doing that every week, you're talking billions of dollars going out of the country every month that never comes back. So the well-being of the United States, it just could not continue. It could not continue, and the people of the United States recognized this. So, to be honest with you, a lot of these things I don't like to see either. I wish there were a better solution. But like Tommy says in this movie about the oil guy, he says, until somebody figures out a better solution, then, this is the way it is, and that's a reality. Okay, so I want to interject a couple things here. First of all, I'm going to talk about Greenland. Now, in the presidential speech yesterday, the Trump speech, he did not mention Greenland. Now, this is something that I've been privy to for a little while because I happen to know people that are involved in the issues with Greenland. But Greenland is a vast country with vast resources, a very small population. And the problem is that Russia, China, the United States, and other countries are vying for those resources. And so the issue of making Greenland part of the United States in some fashion has to do also with the environment, because the other players in this are not especially environmentally conscious. Let's just put it that way. And this is dealing with some very major issues. So I'm not going to go into detail about these because you can read about the part of this that's been made public in the news. All I'm going to say is that Greenland is a major issue, and it's something that has to be looked at in the long term. Additionally, the Panama Canal is another issue, and these are things where the United States tried to do good. They said, okay, we built the canal, we've used it for many years, we're going to make an agreement with Panama that we get to use it, but we'll give it back to the nice people of Panama. And all of a sudden, other people got in there, took over control of the country, and it turns out that China now is running the Panama Canal, not Panama, the people that we gave it to. And so people are, the American, going into foreign countries and taking over the canal again. No, the agreement that they made with Panama was broken. And so that is the issue. So the shipping that goes through there, there's a tariff, and that money is no longer going to Panama. So the deal has been broken, and it's good you have somebody with a head screwed on straight that is looking at these issues and and with a real lens, and not some rosy glasses put on by people that have no clue of what they're talking about. An interesting document came out this last week. Now, I'm going to go back and forth between some of these topics, but oddly enough, it came from NASA. Now, I don't know if you've seen this, but it's a very long document and goes back to development back into the 1990s, into the 2000s. NASA has been busy at work. You think, oh, they built space stations. They send, looking at sending men to the moon again or something. No. NASA is very involved in very nefarious research, let's put it that way, that affects you, dealing with artificial intelligence, in fact, the title of this article is dealing with warfare and space warfare and other types of warfare, dealing with bioagents, dealing with all kinds of really illegal, by international standards, illegal methods of warfare. And so this came out, but one of the things I want to concentrate, and I'll go into this whole document in detail. It's hundreds of pages long, and it goes into detail. But one of the very interesting things that came out in this document is that with the onset of university degrees being given online, in 2025, they fully expect that 20 to 25% of colleges and universities will close by the end of 2025. That people will be going online to get their degrees, and this will literally put the pressure on colleges, which have become overpriced, very much overpriced. Just to give you an idea, when I went to undergraduate school, it was a private school, in those days expensive. In the late part of the 1960s, I graduated in 1970 with a bachelor's degree, double major, from a small private college, now a university, because they've expanded their courses of study. But at the time, it was a college, a small private college. And my tuition was $1,200 a year. My room and board was $1,200 a year. And I had a full scholarship. I kept it for the full years because I kept my grades up, etc. And I also got a matching grant from the federal government, part of what John Kennedy did for student grants. And so that was free money. In other words, it was a grant, not a loan. So my total, this is room and board, was $1,200, tuition was $1,200, and I got a very good degree in physics, double major, physics, mathematics. And now today the cost of college has just gone through the roof. And the way that happened was that after I got out, they realized that they wanted to make a business out of college. So they lowered the standards. They started using the curve, the bell curve, for grades, so that somebody had to get an A, somebody had to get a B, somebody had to get C's. The majority of people would get C's, and then they just kind of dropped the curve down at the lower end. Nobody got F's. You couldn't flunk out. And so it didn't take long for the students to learn this. And when I went back to visit the college one time, I talked to one of my teachers, professors that taught me. He said it's totally different now. He said because for example, when I started as a freshman in physics class, Physics 101, Holliday and Resnick textbook, the teacher came into the room and he said, look around you. There were 44 physics majors declared at that time. And he said, look around you, by the end of this semester, there will be less than 10. And everybody was like, whoa. And that happened week after week. They started dropping out, until finally, at the end of that first semester, there were 9 left. I was one of them. And all 9 of them made it all the way through, and all of them went to grad school in some form. but getting back to the college standards. So what they did is they expanded tuition and opened up enrollment. So they got a lot more students in there, and then they started raising prices because they realized that when Sis and Junior got up to college age, that Mom and Dad had been paying on that house for a period of about probably 20 years. They probably bought the house, then started having kids. Kids grow up, they're 18 years old when they leave the nest, and they go to college. Well, gee, there's quite a bit of equity in that house, and guess what? Mom and Dad are under pressure there to get a college education for the kids, and they'll sign on the dotted line to mortgage the house to get an education for the kids. So all of a sudden, the prices go up to match the amount of available money. And so all of a sudden, the colleges start charging. When I was at Cornell, for example, I had students telling me, undergraduate students, because I was in the faculty there, as I had students in my classes, and they told me, some of them, they were paying $65,000 a year, and I don't know what it's now, but anyway, the price of college certainly has gone up exponentially, and the end result is that it's a very expensive proposition. So, interestingly enough, a lot of these same colleges, because of the availability of online and online education, started marketing their product instead of the students coming to the school, living on campus or off campus and getting a degree after years of hard study and diligent work. They could now sit at home and do it online. They could party at night. They didn't have to, and all the term papers could be written by an AI engine. And then they could modify it a little bit by hand, and there you go. You have a term paper. So all of a sudden, online education is becoming the thing. And this is what the NASA document talked about, that by 2025, the marketing of degrees, I see where you can get a Harvard business degree online. Never go to Harvard. Get a Harvard business degree. Now, one of the problems is with the idea of giving everybody a college degree, like the Liz Warrens of the world would like you to do, and have everybody pay for it. Well, that's a good thought, but just imagine now that the real college degree, one where somebody went and paid and worked and spent their time and years as a full-time student, that's now you have a bachelor's degree, it's the same as the person who got it online spending 5 or 6 hours a week, and so what it does is it waters down the value of those people who actually went to school and earned a degree. It also makes those people who earned a degree and took out immense loans, and they're stuck there with $100,000 to $200,000 in student loans. They could have done the same thing online for a tenth of the price or less. So anyway, these are things that are changing, but the colleges, in a sense, did this to themselves. They made it into a business instead of, like when I was at Cornell. It was not an education institution. It was a research institution with 20 times the amount of money coming in for research than came in through student tuition. Okay, so anyway, this is an interesting dynamic, and I'm going to be talking about this in the future as this develops. Okay, so talking about hurricane damage. Now, this is something that really hits home because in the 1990s, I developed methods of mitigating hurricanes with Russian scientists, and this information was given to the U.S. military as basically a freebie. Here, this is how you take the energy out of hurricanes. And people think, oh, that's impossible, a hurricane is this big storm. but you have to understand what powers the hurricane, and that's what you can control. Just like taking your foot off the gas in a car, you don't have to go with the pedal to the metal if you're driving a car. And there's the same thing is true with hurricanes and other types of man-made disasters. That you can actually control these storms. There's ways of doing it by understanding naturally, and for example, how does a hurricane naturally dissipate? It does so because it moves onshore and it short circuits to the ground. Well, if you move that short circuit offshore, then you can mitigate that hurricane offshore before it makes landfall, cause the tornadoes to develop and burn out their energy, and then also cause the rain to fall offshore. Those are the two big damaging parts of a hurricane. When the hurricane first moves in, people think, oh, it's the eye of the hurricane. No, most of the damage is done by the leading edge of the hurricane as it makes landfall, as it short circuits to ground and causes a lot of tornadoes. And that's something that's totally missing from meteorology. But at any rate, those things could be mitigated. But then after the fact, after that these devastating hurricanes went through the southeastern part of the United States, nothing was done. There were no resources for these people at all. Absolutely beyond shameful. At any rate, a little bit on healthcare. I travel a lot, and I've been affected by things in foreign countries where I had to get medical attention, sometimes in hospitals, sometimes in just clinics. And you can go to a clinic in a third world country and it costs about $5 to $10 for a doctor visit. And they don't give you the prescription there. You go to the pharmacy. The pharmacist is the one who gives you the prescription, and you pay it there. And then again, you're dealing with maybe $10, $20 for something in the United States that would cost $500 or $600. And so, at any rate, the healthcare in the United States, Bill Clinton, when he was elected, promised to get into the insurance industry and the healthcare industry, and he never did anything. So it's something that has to be really looked at, because the amount of money spent on healthcare in the United States is just astronomical. And believe me, you're not getting a product. The United States ranks about 40th in healthcare in the world, and behind some very third world countries, I might add. Okay, there's a myth going around that Latins especially were going to vote Democrat in this past election, and especially the illegals, etc. And it simply was not true. It's something that was in the actual count of the election. The Latinos voted primarily for Trump. And you got to ask yourself, well, why? You know, don't they want their people to come into the country illegally? And the answer is no, they don't. They came from a place that's utter chaos, where you can't walk down the street with a purse in your hand if you're a woman, because you're going to get robbed. Or if you have a piece of jewelry on, you don't wear any jewelry around, or nice clothes or hat. Something can be ripped off by somebody running down the street. And they don't want that here. They got to the United States, and they recognize the value of what they came from versus what is here. So no, they didn't vote to have unlimited number of people coming into the country. They don't want that. And so the Democrats are so, stupid. They have no idea that what these people really are thinking. And I travel to these countries, I know the people, and believe me, they don't want they're trying to fight that in their own countries. And so certainly if they get to the United States, they're not going to they're not going to want all of that to follow them here. Additionally, if someone is visiting, say a woman from France is visiting the United States and happens to go into labor and has a baby in the United States, is that baby then a citizen of the United States? Well, of course not. That's absurd. And the use of the 14th Amendment, which was designed to create and certify that the slaves that came out of the post-Civil War era were citizens, that's what it was designed for, because they were born here and and so it was designed to move those people into a state of citizenship. It was never meant that anybody willy-nilly that happens to be in the U.S. and has a baby, that baby is a U.S. citizen. No. And it wouldn't work in any other country. By the way, the immigration policies of other countries are very strict, and you would not recognize them. I want to talk about the oil issue here, that oil is found all over the world. There's this myth, and it's still propagated by the constant use of the term fossil fuel, that somehow oil is the result of fern forests decaying. It's absolute nonsense. Anybody with a half a brain knew that long time ago, but it's still being propagated. But there's oil every place on planet Earth. And then you get this abiotic oil, that somehow oil is produced by high pressure underground, kind of like diamonds. No, not at all. The Earth has been saturated by oil as the Earth has encountered large comets in the solar system. There you see the hydrocarbons in the tails of comets along with the water. So the water that comes on, that Earth has, the water resources, and layered in the ground also, because Earth has been here for a long time and this is layered up. With the oil sometimes as much as 13,000 feet down. That means the Earth has layered up over who knows how long. And so the silly science that's being promulgated, that ultimately ends up with oil being made from fern forests, is just, that's what it is. That's the only thing you can say is silly science. But the world is covered with oil. There is as much oil on Earth as there is water in the oceans. That's how much there is. And so the idea that we have to go to the Mideast to buy it and then ship it here, no, not at all. We've got all the oil we could ever use here. The problem with burning fossil fuels is that it burns oxygen. Not that it creates carbon dioxide, because really, in a really sane world, people would be saying we need more CO2. Because what would happen if you had, the Earth has a deficit of CO2. We need hundreds of times more CO2. What would happen? The plants would grow much better, they would absorb the sunlight, and they would produce oxygen, and it would rebalance the system. So the atmosphere needs a far greater amount of CO2 than it has today. So the idea of removing CO2 is a fallacy. The idea of global warming is a fallacy. The idea that you driving your SUV up and down the road is causing global warming is a fallacy. These are, and the tens of thousands of scientists have signed an accord stating this. I don't know what to tell you. If you're still of the opinion that burning fossil fuel is causing CO2, which then causes global warming, it's a myth. It's a very well promulgated myth. But the real issue is that we shouldn't be burning this. But as Tommy on that show, the West Texas, the oil man, says, this is the system that we have. And if this oil stops moving, a lot of people are going to die, like right now, instantly. The society couldn't last a day without the amount of oil and gasoline, and we could use a lot less. We use this product willy-nilly to run, the kids off to school, or they going to shopping, or going to the mall, or driving across the country. Everything we do, but remember that the interesting thing is, everybody who's a green tree hugger, which I am myself, is but there's so many people that think, oh, it's that guy's car over there. It's all those other people's cars. It's not my car that's the problem. They don't want to give up their car, like the oilman says. You know, sell your Mercedes there, start riding a bicycle, hunting for your food out in the desert, and live in a tent. Well, you know, who's going to do that? The reality is that we should not be burning native O2. And this myth that somehow the Amazon jungle converts CO2 back into oxygen and that supplies the planet with oxygen, that may have worked in 1920 with the amount of oil they were using then, but it certainly doesn't work now. What we are burning in the atmosphere when we burn oil or petroleum products or burn coal or anything else is native oxygen. It's native in the atmosphere. It has been there for a long time, and that's what we're burning. It is not balanced by CO2 being converted to oxygen from the Amazon jungle. If that were the case, you would see this vast amount of O2 on top of the Amazon jungle, and you don't see that. In the wintertime, right now, people that live up north in the United States, it's barren. There's nothing growing there. There's no plant life at all for a good 6 months of the year. Where's the oxygen coming from? You're breathing native oxygen. You're burning it in your car. You're burning it in jets, in trucks driving up and down the road. Native oxygen. The atmosphere has a lot of it. 20% of the atmosphere is oxygen. And that's what you're burning in your automobile. And we could probably use twice as much atmosphere of oxygen and or 3 times as much, and with twice as much pressure, up to 3 times as much pressure. But because we are oxygen deficient as human beings, it's one of the big health crises, which I will be talking about in one of my upcoming shows here. I'm doing a lot of research in the background. But the human beings are oxygen deficient, and that's why aging, for example, that's one of the major causes of aging, is oxygen deficiency in the atmosphere. The oxygen that you breathe on a daily basis is insufficient to maintain good health. Okay, so back to the idea of oil and oil reserves. The United States and all over the world, in the Atlantic Ocean, etc., everywhere on planet Earth, there are vast amounts of oil. It's just that it happened to be convenient in the Mideast, and they set up this ruse that everybody believed that you have to get the oil from the Mideast and ship it here, and the only people that are really making off of that are the shipping companies. If the United States gets their oil from local resources, then the shipping companies go away. But they'll be exporting American products into other markets, which is near infinite worldwide. You know, natural gas. Trump is also opening up the natural gas ports to ship natural gas and propane worldwide, which we have vast amounts. It is said that in the Appalachian Mountains we have near infinite amount of natural gas. And so using this to fuel our economy and the economy that's been established for our society, okay, now you can't just take that and shut it off one day like a fire hose. You have to build it up and then replace it slowly, but that has to be done on an economic basis, not by some government mandate. Okay, so a topic here that's near and dear to my heart is dealing with putting God back literally into society, whether it's education, whether it's in, and that comes in various forms, and that's not there's a big difference between religion and the belief that there is no God. So religion has to deal with what is more like a set of rules, and also people who are in a sense, deified or exemplified in the teachings of that religion. However, the idea that there's no creator, that all of this just happened, this directly influences science, because they've gotten away with this garbage science for literally 100 years or more, that somehow the universe began in a big bang and it all of a sudden just happened, and it happened all by itself, and willy-nilly, there's a couple billion years later, you're driving your SUV up and down the road. What could be wrong with that? Well, what's wrong with it is that it is complete nonsense. Because if you look at simply a design point of view, if you look at a bridge down the street, or if you look at a building, or you look at anything that you find that's naturally occurring in nature, there's a very, very absolute design to things. And if you looked at a bridge or a building, even though you don't know the architect, the builder, the designer, the engineer that went through the stress analysis of the steel beams in the building or whatever, you're confident that it was there, that building just didn't appear there by itself. That would be the equivalent of somebody saying that, oh, that building there was no designer, nobody really built it, it just appeared there. That's the equivalent of what they're telling you in the world of the universe, that this universe, the organization, that the protons and the electrons and the carbon atoms and everything that you see, the molecules, that on the other side of the universe, they're the same. They're exactly the same. And they give off we can look at light signatures and spectroscopy and understand that what's over there is the same as what's here. It might be redshift, it might have other properties to it, but in studying physics, for example, which is my field, we're just starting to scratch the surface of understanding this. And to say that, no, there's no design, is actually negating your entire existence as a physicist. Because what you are studying is a design when you write an equation, or when you look at the laws of motion, or whatever it is, the thermodynamics, or whatever it is, chemistry, the combination of elements where you take this chemical element and combine it with that one, and they always form the same thing. Is that a design? Yes, it's a very infinitely complex design, but it's a design, and that implies a designer. And that's what we call God. Is that, and it's believe me, it's far beyond man's capability to understand this. So don't even try to. Don't even try to, because someone, say myself, a well-trained physicist, we're just trying to understand how this stuff works, let alone, but it's consistent if you look at how a comet works, or how planetary formation works, or how diamonds form on the nose side of a comet in the electrical discharge. All of these things are consistent throughout the universe. It's a design. And it's so, like I say, it would be the equivalent of saying that building over there, no, there was no designer, there was no builder. That just appeared there all by itself. One day it was like a mini bang, and boom, that building was there. There was, absolutely absurd. So putting God back into life is an essential, and it's one of the things one of the absurdities that has crept in, in the idea that also one of the problems is that they say, well, you cannot talk about religion in school, therefore you can't talk about God in school. There's a big difference. There's a big, big difference. So at any rate, that's one issue. And in about 15 years ago, I wrote a book. It's called McCanney Wing Generator World Energy Project, and there's a section in that book. It's available on my webpage. You can see it here, over there, webpage. And there's a section in that book called The Myth of Alternative Energy. And this was 2010. I said that these three-blade wind turbines and solar panels will never power our society. They just don't work. There's all kinds of problems, between manufacturing, implementing and then actually removing them after they fail in the field, there are all kinds of problems with this equipment, and so they will never work. However, I recognize that wind was the true source of energy that we should be using on this planet. It's a renewable energy source. It's there every day. The sun creates the electrical fields, which is much more powerful than anything we have on Earth, and those winds are there every day around the South Pole, around Alaska. Vast amounts of wind, much more energy than we dig up in oil every day. So at any rate, but the companies in charge of manufacturing and distributing wind energy and solar energy have these products that simply don't work. The issue of global warming. Oh my goodness. You know, in the Paris Accord, if you're a complete idiot and you've never read the Paris Accord, maybe you'll agree with it. That's all I can tell you. It has nothing to do with saving the world or green energy. What it does, its entire purpose is to tax the United States and move that money to third world countries so it can be siphoned through the pockets of people who become very rich off of this process. That's what it's all about. So if you want to go read it, then and understand what it really says, then you would realize that it's not something the United States should be involved in at all. And if you look at, for example, the amount of money going to Ukraine war, that money never got there. That didn't help people in Ukraine. The products, the military products that were purchased on the black market, most of them never ended up in Ukraine. That money got funneled through people's pockets and then kicked back to senators, all kinds of graft and corruption. So at any rate, the idea that the Paris Accord is somehow green and going to save the planet, if you think that, you're an idiot. That's all I can tell you. So the best thing I can tell you. About the Department of Reducing Costs, what is the DOGE, I think they call it, the Department of Government Efficiency, long overdue. The amount of waste in absolutely useless pandering that goes on in Washington to build up these bureaucratic agencies that literally don't do anything. As a bureaucrat, the first thing you would do is to get into a position, then start hiring, and then you tell those people to start hiring, and then you build up this big department, and that solidifies your existence. And literally nothing happens. People have meetings, they write invoices, they buy products. It's another thing that prior to the inauguration yesterday, there were vast amounts of money being spent on contracts, and I got all kinds of emails because I'm in that loop, and I didn't do that. I'm not going to go out and get no bid contracts just to get money out of the government, and most of those people that went and did that are not going to receive a penny of that because it's going to be shut down. So the Department of Government Efficiency, long overdue. All I can say is that I don't agree with everything. In fact, a lot of these policies actually hurt me personally in my wind energy business, because what the wind energy industry did, General Electric, Siemens, is they created a product that didn't work. Everybody realizes it. Now they're shutting it down. The government is no longer going to lease offshore federal ocean, the regions leased for wind energy. They're not going to do that anymore. They're shutting that down, and rightfully so. But if my equipment gets out in the ocean producing hydrogen, it will be on barges. It's not going to be in the, even offshore. It's going to be out in the middle of the ocean where nobody's going to ever see it or know that it's there, other than huge amounts of hydrogen are coming out. So at any rate, I hope that helps you understand that what's going on now is very necessary, long overdue, and I don't agree with everything. Some of it hurts me personally, but to stop the development of three-blade wind turbines and solar panels as they exist today, very important to to stop that fake industry from continuing.
This has been Master of Science with host James McCanney. Join us each week as James will delve into historical figures such as Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein, and the great mathematicians as we explore the history of man, Earth, and our universe as you've never seen it before. Tuesdays, 7 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Bold Brave TV network, powered by B2 Studios.